Unlike many others, I never grew up with Cardcaptor Sakura, or Cardcaptors as the edited and censored dub was called here. And because of that, I never had that sense of nostalgia towards the show, for better or for worse. So, when I became aware of the show and debated watching it, I often went back and forth over the years thinking, well, is it really worth it? Am I really going to like it? Is it really able to stand on its own independently of the nostalgia people have for it? I really didn't know. And its length, originally 70 episodes and 2 movies, later getting up to 93 episodes and 2 movies, also put me off of it. But then the original show got put on Netflix last year, and I really started to give it more consideration. And a few weeks ago, I finally bit the bullet, so to speak, and gave the show a watch. And I'm pleasantly surprised to say I enjoyed it quite a bit. Even though I don't have that inherent nostalgia for it from childhood, just watching something with that, 90s hand-drawn aesthetic still gave me a similar feeling to nostalgia. I guess just nostalgia for that art style and type of world you just don't see anymore. But on top of that, I just found the show very fun. Just getting to see this charming, if simplistic in its structure, kind of series really gave me a lot of joy. That's not to say it's perfect or it's some sort of masterstroke, but there's still a lot to like here that isn't entirely based in having seen it from one's childhood. Sakura herself is a very likable protagonist, and one that actually does show, gradual but consistent, for the most part, growth over the course of the series, which is something I like. We see her slowly be able to handle the situation she's put in better and better, and be able to strategize more and think about, what cards she has at her disposal, what resources she has, how she can use the environment. And I like that a lot. I like that she becomes better equipped, both in terms of what she actually has and the way she thinks about things as the series goes on. And it allows her to tackle those challenges in a much better way than she could have at the beginning of the series. And in general, she is just a very likable protagonist. The other characters, though, are not necessarily bad, but also not as stand out, at least in my opinion. They certainly are functional, but I don't know if I'd call them remarkable. Tomoyo's fine, Toya's fine, Yukito's fine. There's nothing really problematic, I would say, but I don't think they have as much dimension to them as Sakura does. And then, of course, there's Shaoran, who we can't exactly ignore here. And I don't really know how to feel about Shaoran. At first, I really, really didn't like him, and honestly, I didn't like him for most, if not all, of the original 70 episodes. And that's not to say he doesn't get better. He does. He grows, much like Sakura does. He starts off very angsty, very jealous, very cocky, especially in serving that sort of rival role towards Sakura, even if he really isn't that effective of a rival, I don't think. But he, even when he gets less angsty and more trusting towards Sakura and the others, a lot of that angst gets replaced with a different kind of angst with respect to his emotions towards the other characters, especially Sakura, as his romantic feelings for her grow. And I feel like the show loses some of its charm as Shaoran's feelings for Sakura grow, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But I never really felt like the original 70 episodes had a sweet spot for Shaoran. There was always something to make me not exactly the happiest when he was on screen. Clear Card kind of maybe gets to that sweet spot, or at least gets closer to it, because Shaoran has matured so much by that point, and he's not really an annoyance when he's on screen. But there's sort of a different problem there, where he just isn't really doing as much, and that's intentional in terms of the plot. There's a reason why he feels more absent and less important, but because of that, it makes him just kind of feel like he's there, as opposed to being an active annoyance. And while I think that's better than being an annoyance, it's still not quite where I think his character should be. But I would imagine if we get more of Clear Card and see more of Shaoran doing things, they might finally even things out a bit with him. I don't know how other people really feel about Shaoran, if they like him or feel similarly towards me, as I do. But I don't know. I really do kind of struggle to like that character in the original series, especially. As far as the story, the first arc, the Clow card or Clo card, I don't really know which way it's supposed to be pronounced. I thought it was Clow, but then whenever they refer to the sorcerer, Clow Reed, or Clo Reed, it sounds like Clo Reed. So Clo cards, Clow cards, I'm probably just going to say Clow cards. That's what I've internalized more so. But anyway, that first arc with the Clow cards, I think, is when the show was at its best. I think the structure, even if it is just a monster of the week story, I think it's effective. I think a lot of the cards are pretty imaginative. I think the visuals are very strong. I think the goal, slowly getting a card one at a time, or two at a time in some cases, works very well. And even if it is simplistic, it's effective. And I think the series had the most optimism and the most charm in that original arc of 46 episodes. To the point where, looking back on it, I really think that's where the show should have ended, with episode 46. Granted, I think things could have been expanded on, of course, if it actually wanted to end at that point, but I really feel like that would have been the best point to wrap the show up. Because the arc after that, the Sakura card arc, I don't think really works all that well. It really felt to me like the show was spinning its wheels. Not that it didn't know what it wanted to do, it did. It's just what it wants to do doesn't feel that necessary or impactful. And you as the audience can realize that pretty early on, once it becomes clear what the villains want to do. And you'll realize it way before the other characters will. And you'll think, really? That's it? Like, it's not that it doesn't fit with the show, it just doesn't feel like things are going anywhere for such a long stretch of it. And it's hard to feel like that arc needs to be there. And this goes back to what I was talking about with Shaoran. Like, here is where his feelings for Sakura really become a focal point. And on top of the main story not really being that interesting, in my opinion, you also have this like constant, depression and angst from Shaoran because of his feelings for Sakura, and the show just becomes harder and harder to enjoy when that becomes the focal point. And there's just so much in this arc that I feel like takes away the joy and the optimism and the charm that the first arc is so radiating out with. And because of that, I don't really like the Sakura card that much, Sakura card arc that much. It's not bad. It doesn't like ruin the show. I do think ultimately with its ending and the second movie that it concludes fairly well. But unless you're super invested in the Shaoran and Sakura dynamic, I don't know how well you're going to receive the arc. It feels like something tacked on that doesn't really need to be there. So, despite all that, I think the original series still ends well enough. And plenty of people were content with that, with the ending that we get in the second movie. And for 18 years, that was the ending. That was it. 70 episodes, 2 movies, and we were done. But then we got Clear Card in 2018. And I've definitely seen a lot of mixed reception towards Clear Card, because you either seem to really like it or really hate it or not really care. Honestly, I went into Clear Card not expecting much from it because of that mixed reception. But surprisingly, I actually pretty much liked it more than the Sakura card arc. Not more than the Cloud card arc, but I think the Clear Card anime gets back to what I liked about the original 46 episodes. The angst between Sakura and Shaoran and their will they, won't they, like that's mostly gone. There isn't as much there isn't as much of a negative aura, I'd say, surrounding them and their relationship. Things are at least somewhat progressing, even if it's still sort of kept to the sidelines because of Shaoran being kept to the sidelines for a bit. But I like that it feels so much like the original arc. That we're getting cards again. There's a lot more joy and optimism in the air. And even though it doesn't have that 90s aesthetic anymore, what are you going to do about it? That was never going to return with a modern anime, and I think it's mostly forgivable. I think most of the character designs and the settings work. The only one I'd maybe argue against is Sakura's herself, and this is very minor. I just wish her hair was a little darker, because her hair color is, in my opinion, noticeably lighter than in the original, and that, for whatever reason, that bugs me a little bit, but not, to a terribly serious degree. And yet, I don't exactly fault anyone for not liking that Clear Card feels so much like it's going back to what the Cloud Card arc had, because you can easily look at that and say, oh, it's just retreading old ground, it's just nostalgia bait. And yeah, it might be. I can't really look at it that way, though, because I don't have that type of nostalgia for it. I didn't watch the original Cardcaptor Sakura 18 years ago and then watch Clear Card. I watched it all in one go a few weeks ago. So I can't look at it from that perspective. But I certainly can't tell somebody not to. Like, I get it. And if someone's going to look at Clear Card and have those opinions, yeah, that's fully justified. But for me, as someone who didn't watch the original as a kid, I like that Clear Card is the way it is in terms of going back to what I liked so much about the Cloud Card arc and not really feeling too much like the Sakura Card arc. So, generally, I liked Clear Card. But that isn't to say there aren't issues. I think, well, there's two pretty big ones. The first one is the simplest. The fact that it doesn't have an ending. The story just stops, and it isn't in any way close to being wrapped up. Even though we kind of know, who the main antagonist is, sort of maybe have an idea of what they're trying to do, but not really. The point is we need more. There needs to be more Clear Card to continue and hopefully close the story back up. If we never get that, then yeah, Clear Card will be viewed much more negatively by me when we get to that point. But I kind of doubt that we'll never get more Cardcaptor Sakura, right? I mean, a franchise this big, I'm sure eventually they'll make more. Especially because even though this isn't exactly following the manga perfectly, even though I haven't read the manga, I can certainly surmise that based on the differences I know between the original Cardcaptor Sakura and its manga. I would imagine they still want to wait until there's enough of the Clear Card manga that they can take stuff from in order to continue the anime. So until that manga ends, I don't really think that the Clear Card anime will be able to properly end. But I can't blame anyone for not being happy that they extended a show that was already over and then didn't give it an ending. Normally I would despise that, and the only reason I don't is because I would be genuinely stunned if they didn't make more Cardcaptor Sakura. If this was any other show, I'd say, how dare they do this? This is horrible. But I just can't see a world where they don't make more. If eventually, like 10, 20 years go by and there's no more, I'll be like, okay, yeah, this was not the right thing to do, making this additional season. But as things are now, I'm not too beat up about it. The thing that does bother me with Clear Card really doesn't have that much to do with Clear Card, the show. It more so has to do with Clear Card, the prologue episode that came out about 4-ish months before the show itself. And this prologue episode is something that gave me a lot of headaches during the week or so that I watched Clear Card, because the prologue, by nature of being called the Clear Card prologue, makes you think, oh, golly gee, this is going to set up the rest of this season. It's really important that I watch this. And yet most of what's in that prologue gets ignored. And thankfully, I'm not complaining about that. I'm happy most of it gets ignored. Because what the Clear Card prologue is actually an adaptation of the end of the original manga, which has a number of fairly noticeable differences with the ending of the original show. And when watching that prologue, I, and I'm sure many others, thought, oh, Clear Card is going to be its own continuity that much more so follows the original manga and the Clear Card manga itself. It's not going to be in the same world as the original anime. But fun fact, no, it is. And the Clear Card anime makes that pretty clear, no pun intended, by making a number of references to the original series, to the original series' ending, and many, many, many references to the second movie. All of these things really can't happen based on the Clear Card prologue and all the things that it, in essence, retcons if you want to follow it. And ultimately, pretty much everything except one element of that Clear Card prologue is ignored in Clear Card proper. And that one thing does cause a little bit of a headache, but I think it can be reasoned out. You can find a way to explain it away. So, why did they make this prologue? I have no idea. I don't know if the original intention at Madhouse was to try to have this be its own world that followed the manga more closely and be separate from the original series, and then they changed their minds, or if they just really wanted to adapt the end of the original manga but felt like they had to market it as being connected to the upcoming Clear Card anime, or if they just really wanted that pink bear to be relevant. And this is the one thing from the Clear Card prologue that actually shows up in the anime. In the prologue, and this is spoilers, this is straight up spoilers. If you don't want to listen to this, you've been warned. In the prologue itself, Sakura makes a bear for Shaoran before he goes back to Hong Kong to mimic the bear that Shaoran makes for her in the anime. But this never happens in the original anime, and the way it's presented in the Clear Card prologue, as with pretty much everything else in that prologue, cannot happen in the context of the original series. But that pink bear and the fact that Sakura made it for Shaoran, stayed up all night to do it before he left, is referenced in Clear Card. And we see that bear in Sakura's room multiple times, which raises the question, well, why do they care so much about this freaking bear? And how does that fit in with the fact that the rest of Clear Card pretty clearly follows from the original anime? And I think the way to explain it away, assuming they don't do it in an eventual second season of Clear Card, is to just say that Sakura made it for Shaoran the night before he and Maylene went back to Hong Kong at the end of the second movie, rather than what we see in the prologue. I think that's the cleanest way to explain it away. I don't think there's anything in Clear Card proper to dispute that interpretation. And once you iron that kink out, there's really nothing at all tying the prologue to anything else in the franchise, as far as the anime is concerned. And so, my recommendation to anyone who hasn't seen Clear Card is that you should 100% either skip the prologue entirely or hold off on watching it. Watch Clear Card itself, the regular 22 episodes, and then if you really want to, at the end, go back and watch the prologue and just understand that it's really just an adaptation of the end of the manga. Because if you watch that first, you're going to be very, very confused, like I was, as the Clear Card anime progresses, and you realize, oh, this prologue pretty much doesn't matter. And again, I think it's a good thing, because I don't think we needed there to be two anime continuities. I don't think it needed to be that messy. But I guess either way, we still do. It's just instead of it being the original and Clear Card that are separate, it's this prologue that's off in its own little universe. So, I don't know what they were thinking with this prologue, but if you ignore it and don't worry about it, there really isn't too much that causes trouble between the original series and Clear Card. And for that, I am grateful. So in the end, while I do have problems with various parts of Cardcaptor Sakura, and even though I liked Clear Card, I still think that the series probably should have ended with episode 46, or with an altered version of it that just gave it more of an epilogue. I'm still happy I watched this. I'm happy I watched all 93 episodes and 2 movies. I'm happy I finally experienced this series, and I'm happy to be able to say that, yes, I liked it, despite not having that nostalgia for it because I didn't watch it as a child. And I hope that that serves as some level of encouragement for people who were also as fearful of checking it out like I was for so many years because of its length and because of fears that the only reason it gets praised is because of nostalgia. I'm happy to at least say that the nostalgia shouldn't be an issue. You should be able to enjoy this if the premise seems interesting, if the art style seems interesting, if the characters seem interesting, even if you didn't watch it as a kid. You may not enjoy all of it, just like I don't enjoy all of it, at least not as much as the high points of the franchise, but I think you will still get something out of it. And hopefully we will get that second season or whatever to conclude Clear Card so that the franchise isn't left with an open ending, because that would be a real big shame.